Nobody goes on a serious canoe trip without an axe, period. On a wild Canadian river, I'm going to tell you they're going to bring their canoe back in pieces in a suitcase if they survive at all.
Hey, I'm Ivan, and welcome back to my little channel here, Ivan Outdoors and the podcast. Just a little place where jamokes with boats and other outdoor toys that they just can't seem to put down get to talk to other outdoor jamokes. Today I'm talking with Cliff Jacobson, who is a inconspicuously famous canoeist here in the U.S. He's also an author, a wilderness author. He's got about 20 titles that he's written, and he's been a professional canoe guide. So he's been kind enough to sit down with me today and talk about getting kids out into the wilderness, saws versus axes, and some other outdoor dipshittery. So let's get into it. Cliff, welcome, and thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate sitting down. And I have a few preliminary questions because I take it you've been around the block a little bit and have been a long-time paddler. But first, I'm curious, do you have or have you kept a list of how many rivers you've paddled? Do you have any sort of metrics?
Yeah, actually, but it's on my website. But I don't know. Off the top of my head, I would say, and there's a lot of them I haven't even listed because I haven't considered them significant. The only ones that are on that website basically are the Canadian, Alaskan, I think Costa Rica's on there. I don't know if I remember to put that. Costa Rica, Norway, Finland. Those are all on there. But the less significant ones, like every time I go to like the boundary waters and local rivers and most American rivers, I don't even bother to list. So I would say I've probably done 50 or 60 different rivers, but some of them I've done many times. My favorites I've done many times. For example, I've done the Hood twice. That's an Arctic, subarctic river.
The Hood?
I've done the North Knife River to Hudson Bay, I think 4 times. I've done the Fond du Lac 3 or 4 times. So I have some favorites that I keep coming back to. A lot of paddlers that do these far northern trips like to collect rivers. They like to collect them. I don't care about collecting rivers. I care about having a great experience. And some rivers are just better than others, and some are so wonderful you just want to do them again. And the thing is, what a lot of people don't understand, every time you do a river a second time or a third time, it's never like it was last time. I mean, river levels change. At high water, the experience is one thing. At low water, it's completely another thing. And if you wait a half a dozen years or so, the channels change significantly in many rivers that sometimes you don't even recognize parts of the river.
Right.
So, it's not a bad idea to do a favorite river again. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah. Here in Colorado, being somewhat, we have rivers. We have a lot of rivers, and we have a lot of whitewater though, and unfortunately, a lot of, well, with kids and or beginners and stuff, you kind of got to find some beginner runs. And the Upper Colorado is one that is super popular. And if I do it again, I just want to punch myself in the face at this point because I've done it so many times. So I'm at the point where I don't want to run over old ground right now. I want to collect some rivers.
Yeah. Well, one of my best friends lives in Fort Collins. And so I go out and visit him every year. And Larry Rice is a pretty well known writer and super outdoors guy. He's paddled every continent. He's been all over the world. So Larry and I have done a lot of paddling. Larry was into serious whitewater. He did a lot of class 3, 4 stuff. But he's kind of out of it. And as you age, as you get older, you discover that you really don't need that high-end whitewater adrenaline rush anymore. and you discover wilderness rivers. Actually, I started out doing what a lot of people do. I got into whitewater. I had a wetsuit and a helmet, and I paddled one of these C1s and with float bags and all the whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
And then I started doing the wilderness rivers, and I said, I don't want to do that anymore. I'd rather go on a wilderness river. So, doing the pure whitewater thing is good training. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll say that. But it's also very different than doing wilderness trips. When you paddle whitewater, you're driving a Mazda Miata.
Right.
When you paddle these northern Canadian rivers, you're driving a 16-wheeler. All
Yeah.
right, and the differences are pronounced. In fact, on all my trips that I've done, I have probably had more trouble with experienced whitewater paddlers than I have with not just intermediate paddlers, because they do some they paddle, they'll be paddling technical class 3, and they'll look at a wilderness river in Canada, which is say a low class 3 or a 2 plus.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and you stand there and you look at it. I mean, in a whitewater boat, it's a non-issue. You go.
Right.
With a tandem canoe with $10,000 worth of equipment in it, you don't. You
Right.
look at it very carefully and you choreograph everything. If it's paddleable, you do it. If there's even a question about that, then you line or you portage the most difficult sections. And if you don't know how to back ferry, you're dead on a Canadian river. And a lot of serious whitewater, in fact, one pair of whitewater paddlers I had on one trip, um, when I said, you're going to, the way we got to get around these corners and the way you got to slow down to see what's going on, you got to back ferry. And one of them said to me, quote, a back ferry is a knee-jerk reaction. And I said, maybe in a whitewater boat where you can spin around 180 and paddle forward, you can't do that in a loaded tandem canoe.
Right.
Those guys capsized in a relatively easy rapid. And after that, they got the message. So the skills you learn for in a whitewater boat are useful. Don't get me wrong, they are. You're going to do eddy turns and peel outs and side slips and and braces and the list kind of goes on. But when you get in a tandem canoe with a bunch of weight in it, a lot of those things can fall by the wayside. So if the boat that you paddle regularly makes a big difference. In fact, I don't know. Here's an interesting story. You can always edit this out. But for the last 10 years or so, I've been spending my entire paddling life in one of my solo canoes. So what you do is you learn what that boat itself is capable of. All right. You may be capable of more, but the boat may not be. So on one of our trips, actually it was the Buffalo River in Arkansas, I had a couple friends along, both of which were very, very good whitewater paddlers. But this was the first time they had paddled these are Kevlar cruising canoes. They're not whitewater boats, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're capable in class 2 plus, 3 minus with a spray cover if
Yeah.
you paddle well, all right? Now, I'm not going to say they didn't get into trouble, but their maneuvers were sloppier compared to me. Okay. Now, by the end of the trip, they had pretty much figured out the boat. All right.
Right.
So it's important to remember that skill is really important. Judgment is probably more important, but the boat you paddle also really determines what you can do and what you can't do. Sort of like maybe you own a Corvette and a pickup truck. Well, you know what you can do with both.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a
Okay.
great answer. Yeah. It's I remember the first time I got into a canoe recently. It was this pack boat, and I was just out messing around with it. on the South Platte, and I had been paddling, whitewater boats primarily, or my big raft, which is a whole nother animal altogether. And yeah, it was just like, oh my God, I'm going to swamp this thing so easily just because I'm not used to having to turn just that huge hull that really is in the water. And you have to plan 3 or 4 steps ahead, almost like you're driving a sweet boat or something. You just got to be looking downriver,
Yeah.
and you can't make a snap judgment like you can in a whitewater boat.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Give me 1 second here. We went down a tangent.
sorry.
It's all right. That's how it's supposed to be, right?
Okay.
Um, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your uh, your earlier life and stuff. And first of all, are you married? Have you been married? I assume so.
Yeah.
And kids?
Yeah. I married my wife, Sharon Roman. I had two incredible daughters. I mean, both of my daughters are just super smart,
Mm-hmm.
uh, very successful. One is probably the best employment lawyer in California, and the other one is a screenwriter, and she's amazing. And
Cool.
they both hate canoeing and camping.
Ah, no.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
one of my. We're gonna
yeah.
get to that.
They
I have a
both hate
question about
canoeing and camping, but they love their daddy to pieces.
that. That's
So,
good.
I have a philosophy about this if you want to hear it. My
Yeah, I
philosophy.
mean, one of my questions is like, because you've already raised your kids, like how much should a parent push their kid or drag their kid along into the outdoors so they
All right.
don't
I think I can
sour
answer
on it?
that because I have led teenagers on canoe trips for many years, probably hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm.
They still keep in contact. So here's what I've decided over the years. It's a gene.
It's a gene.
Seriously, it is a gene. You may get a gene for I hate the outdoors. Okay, I have a grandson like that. That hate can be turned with care. That hate can be turned into tolerance. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can get the gene for tolerance, which can be turned into like. You can get the gene for like, which can be turned into love. Or you can get the gene for immediate love. I'll just tell you a couple stories to, so that you understand where it comes from.
Yeah.
Okay, story number one. I had this girl, Teresa Pash. I still
Mm-hmm.
remember many years ago when I was teaching school. She'd never been on a canoe trip or never been in the outdoors to speak of. Um, we took her to the Boundary Waters. We had a program with these kids. And I remember one evening, it was raining. It was raining so hard, and I was under a tarp that it was just blowing into the tarp and stuff. And I said, "That's it. I'm going in my tent." There's Teresa sitting out on a rock with a poncho on, loving every minute of it. She got the gene.
Yeah.
I still remember another girl. Took her on the Boundary Waters. There was not a cloud in the sky. There was not a bug in the sky. It was not windy. The sun was shining all the time. It was absolutely perfect weather, and she hated every minute of it because she missed her friends and her curling iron. All right. So I took my grandson on a canoe trip when he was 9, almost 10.
Mm-hmm.
He hated every minute of it. He loved the food. He said, "My grandpa's a good cook." Okay. He loved that. And prompted me, that prompted me to write my teen book. Okay. Race to Survival.
Yeah.
Okay. It was based on my grandson.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, and my girls were in a canoe when they were literally months old. We took them down local rivers. I lived in Indiana at the time. I mean, as long as they were sitting in the canoe going la la la, and they were entertained, they were happy enough. But it was not something they ever wanted to do. So I would say to parents, I would say, here's the deal. In the total scheme of things, the most important thing that you can get from your kids is love and a willingness to learn and to work hard to try to be successful. That's what's important.
Yeah.
Now, if they don't love the wilderness like you, well, suck it up because you know what? It's okay. My girls are like that. They are just nuts about me, and I'm nuts about them. But they don't like camping and canoeing, and they never will. And they've been on enough trips to know if they like it or not. So you
Yeah.
can't force it. And what's going to happen if you try to force it is one, it's not going to work. Number two, you're going to start losing the thing that you value most, which is the closeness and the love of your kids, because you're forcing them to do something they don't want to do.
Right.
Now, I may be wrong about the gene thing, but I've had so much experience with it, and I've seen people who've never been a hardly outdoors in their life other than the city park, and bingo, they just fall in love with them immediately. While others, it doesn't matter how often they go, they just don't like it.
Hmm. Well, I mean, was it was it hard to accept that your daughters wanted nothing to do with the outdoors, or was it sort of a gradual acceptance?
No, it wasn't hard to accept because I'm going to go back to what I said before.
Yeah.
They love me to pieces, and
Sure.
I love them to pieces. They just like other things, and that's okay. And I don't think that's really a lot different than, say, you're a doctor and you got a kid. You want your kid to be a doctor. He doesn't want to be a doctor.
Right.
He wants to be an Indian chief or
Hmm.
whatever. I mean, I can tell stories all day, but I do have some a great. You can always edit this out.
Yeah.
I, many years ago, I had a urologist from Minnesota on one of my canoe trips. He was a real high end doctor. I mean, he's like one of the best in Minnesota. He had a son who didn't want to go to college. He wanted to be an outward bound instructor. And this had caused a huge rift. Oh, by the way, his mother was a doctor too. They were both doctors, and the kid wants to be an outward bound instructor. And there was this big rift between he and his dad.
Hmm.
And I could see that when they started. And then his dad came over to me and he told me the story about how my son wants to be an outward bound instructor. And we're not close. And I thought maybe this trip will get us close. Well, here's what happened. The first morning of the trip, now he's not a kid, he's like 18.
Hmm.
Okay, so this kid, first morning of the trip, we get out, fire's going. I'm looking at the fire. It's a well-built fire. Whoever built this knows what he's doing. And the coffee pot's on. And, and I look up. Oh, it was this kid who got up and made the fire and did all this. All right. And as we're going down and whatever we're doing, this is in Canada. This is a canoe trip in Ontario. And as we come to obstacles, the kid's the first one to jump out of the canoe, waist deep in water, grab a boat, do whatever. This continues day in and day out. By the end of this trip, the crew had such great respect for this kid. They said, we should have a vote and see who our favorite camper is. It's this kid. All right. So after that, we go out to dinner. The trip's over now. Now we go back to Minnesota, Grand Marais. We're having all dinner together. It's dark now, and we're walking out. And the dad comes up to me, and he's crying. And he said, "This trip was so amazing." He says, "I never had any respect for my son before." He said, and he turned out to be the most popular, most respected person on that trip. He said,
Wow.
"I can see how wrong I've been." This changed his life.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Wow.
no, your kid does not have to be just like you.
I get that. I don't want my kids to be just like me. I just, you know, I mean, I have a daughter and I love her to death and vice versa. And I'm trying not to push her into the outdoors, However, when we go and do family stuff, oftentimes it can be in the outdoors. So she has to go along on a certain amount
How old is she?
of that stuff. She's 14.
Okay. All right.
And
First of all, you got to understand something about 14. because I taught that age group for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 14 is eighth grade. All right.
Yep.
Nobody wants to teach eighth grade. I'm serious.
Yeah, I
Teachers do
believe it.
not want to teach eighth grade. Why? Because hormones are flowing bloody murder. The one thing that kids value at that age are friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's friends, 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 and nothing else counts. Okay?
Right.
It's the nature of the beast. So when they're 13 or 14 years old, it's a rare kid who is going to want to spend time outdoors unless they have that outdoor gene. All right? And
Right.
most people probably don't. So, I would say if she liked it when she was younger, she will probably pick it up when she's older. If she didn't like it when she was younger, I'm sorry, but you got a lovely young lady here who loves you and will be very successful. She just won't go camping.
Yeah. And that's fine. I understand the wisdom in that. It's just one of those things I thought I would ask, since I think a lot of uh parents my age can, especially if they're passionate about the outdoors, can struggle with.
Does she not like it?
No, she's fine. She actually does pretty well.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Well,
and that's why
maybe
I'm trying to really ride that. You know, I want to come near that line, but I don't want to go up to it.
no. Well, don't push her. Just if you're gonna go, you can ask her if she wants to go. If she does want to go, okay. If she likes it a little bit, she might find a boyfriend who loves it, and that might change her perspective. Who knows?
Right, right,
But
right.
yeah, yeah, but
Which,
I grew up in Chicago. All right, there's no wilderness in Chicago, but I loved doing this stuff since I was 8 years old. I
mm-hmm,
don't know why. It was just there. So again, I offer that it's a gene and you can try to cultivate it if you can. And like can turn to love and
yeah,
tolerance can turn to like. But
right,
if it's tolerance, it's not going to love,
right, right, right.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. No, I don't know where she is on that. I mean, she can paddle. I mean, she can paddle this blue Cocapelli back here just fine. And she did ask me to possibly wrangle or outfit a raft trip this summer with her friends, but
Okay.
it's petered away. So
Well,
I'm
then
happy
that's what,
that she just asked.
yeah, well, then, as I'm going to say again, at this age,
Hmm.
friends are everything. So if
Yeah.
she wants to do a raft trip with friends, do a raft trip with friends.
Oh, I would
You
have.
know,
I
yeah,
will.
just don't strive for high C on this because you know what? They're going on this raft. They want to go on this raft trip so they can splash around in the water and laugh
Yeah.
and sing and do stuff like that. You can have a few rapids in there, but you better be careful because they don't know how to paddle rapids very well, and they could get into trouble, and then it won't be fun. So, so
Yeah.
you get a drift trip with some riffles and class one, maybe a low class, very low class two. You would
Yeah.
probably be hitting it on the button. Make the food good, have a big fire at night, and that may turn um, tolerance into like or
Yeah.
like into love. Who
Yeah.
knows?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I guess that's where I'm at. I'm just trying to
yeah.
let her tell me what she's ready for and try not to push it too
All
much.
right.
I've got an almost 5 year old boy who he wants to go camping a lot right now. So we're just trying to make that fun, go out and even
Good
in the
for you.
backyard or just take
Yeah,
little micro trips
yeah,
when we can. And yeah, he wants to build a cabin in the backyard right now.
yeah.
I can't do that. But well, that's all really
All right.
good advice. Um, cover that. Tell me about your guiding experience, and do you think that guides get enough credit for having a real job? I'm asking
Well,
that for guide friends.
Excuse me 1 second. I gotta. Where I live, we get these terrible Asian Asian ladies, and this one was walking on my computer, so I gotta get it. Um, it depends whether you have a good guide or a bad guide or whatever. But
Mhm.
most people take a guided trip because they don't feel competent in doing it themselves. So, but the first thing the guide basically has to do is ascertain if they're capable of doing the trip. And a lot of guides don't do this. And the reason why they don't, it's sort of like if you've read the book Into Thin Air, you understand. Because these trips, especially in northern Canada, Alaska, are very expensive.
Mhm.
And when you put a trip together, the guy has to figure out how much money he has to make on that, or she. And if you don't get a full house, you lose several $1,000s. So what happens is guided trips often pick up people who are marginal and therefore later become problematic.
Mhm.
Uh, in Into Thin Air, people died because of it. There have been a number of canoe trips, um, guided canoe trips, where there's been a lot of problems simply because of that. Um, I've had problems on my trip and trips. And as a result, I set out some. And even after you set out the requirements, like, can you do this? Can you do that? You know, what is your approximate weight? Now, I know that's a question you shouldn't ask, but I once had a 400, literally 390 some odd pound guy who wanted to do an Arctic canoe trip. That's just, and I had to tell him he was a really nice guy, but
Yeah.
he could barely fit in the canoe. And I said, yeah, you can't do this. It's just too dangerous.
Yeah.
And so or sometimes you get people, I've had people with bad attitudes. I've had people with axes to grind. Um, um, and I've had people who just don't want to follow what I'm telling them to do. Uh, One woman in particular, we used very expensive tents, for example, had Cannondale rustics. These tents at the time, this is 30 years ago, were $350 a piece then. And I told everybody how to pack these tents. You cannot just put the poles. The poles are too long to fit in the pack, which is the problem of early tents in those days. You can't just put it under the pack platform. If this is how it has to be done. She refused to do it. I said, lady, I said, a pole set alone for one of these tents is $150. I cannot lose the pole sets. So she really got ticked off at me and went her way and reported. And I was guiding trips for the Science Museum in Minnesota and reported me to the Science Museum and made a big deal out of it. Um, and she wouldn't check rapids with me. When we would together, we would walk down, we would look at a rapid, and I would say, how do you guys feel about this? I said, this is a doable rapid. You can do this, 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 this. If you feel you can't do it, let me know. I and another capable paddler will take your boat through.
Mhm.
Okay. She wouldn't even leave the canoe, go look at the rapids, because what she said was, why should I look at them? You've already made the decision. So if you get people like that, it can really spoil your trip. What
Right.
spoils your trip is not people who don't paddle well or people who don't know how to camp. What spoils your trip are jerks. That's what spoils your trip. So if people say, and I had questions like this, Cliff, what should you look for in a canoe partner? I said, number one, needs to be a very nice person. Okay? You can teach a nice person how to paddle, but you can't teach a jerk how to be nice.
Right.
So that's what'll spoil your trip. So that's maybe the answer to your guide thing. But first of all, be aware. I get I get emails from people who say, Cliff, I'd like to be a guy like you. What do I have to do? And the answer is, one, you will not make a living at it. Believe me,
Yeah.
you will not make a living at it. All right? That's the first thing. If you are not married and you don't have kids and you want to work like for Outward Bound, or you want to work for one of the Western raft companies and do that guiding, fine. you'll make enough to get by in a shared apartment with 2 or 3 friends. Otherwise, and then when you get older, you will get to a point where either you don't want to do it or you can't do it. So,
Right.
you know what? This is not a profession, it's a secondary way to have some fun, see some rivers you haven't canoed, and make a few bucks in the process. Look at it this way: I taught school for 35 years.
Hmm.
I have a master's degree plus a bunch of hours beyond that. I taught in good schools that in teacher pay paid probably above average. You know, the and I had a wife and 2 babies. I could not pay the bills on my teaching salary. So I started guiding these trips for the Science Museum, and that brought in enough extra money so that I could pay the bills. That's how it all began.
Hmm.
And it never, all during my teaching career, it was the same thing. Had the summers off, bingo, up to Canada, which is why when they talk about, oh, we're going to have year-round school, teachers, they can teach year-round school. Boy, you guys don't get it, do you? Because the deal is you don't pay enough money for teachers to live on your salary. We need the summer to make more money.
Right.
Can't get 2 weeks off here and there. And some guys paint houses, some guys mow lawns, whatever. But
Yeah.
there's not enough money in that educational system to support a family on a teacher's salary. 2 teachers, yeah. One, no. So with the money that I could make guiding, and then of course as I guided these trips more and more and more and more, I learned more and more and more and more,
Hmm.
and I started writing. Okay, and then I made some money writing, but you can't make a living that way either. I mean, I've probably written 15 books, probably more like 20, 25 with all the revisions involved. I could never make a living writing. Okay. So there's a saying that artists have, be it a writer, a poet, or making vases or beautiful things out of clay or painting.
Hmm.
You can make a you can make a fortune as an artist, but you can't make a living. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
know, the people who make $100,000 plus a year writing books are the 1 millionth of 1%.
Right.
All right.
Well, that's also that's like a whole tangent topic that we're not paying our teachers enough to live, that they have to go out during the summer and get a side hustle. I think is kind of
Well,
that's
we won't get
that's
into
not
the
right.
teaching thing
We won't
because
get into that, but
I'm
that's
well known for rants on that subject.
yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, that's a whole nother debacle. So anymore, people in my demographic, the middle age-ish, with young kids or kids in school, family job, living in the city, under all the pressure, basically under what I call industrial disease after the Dire Straits song, right? Um, you had kids, young kids. I see you were into paddling back then. How do you make time when you're in a position like I am, or like many people, to get out and prioritize your time outdoors, especially when your kids are young? If you have any advice in
See,
that realm.
I just, the fortunate thing for me about teaching was we had that long summer
Yeah, but
break.
wait. But you had the summer, but you said you're going up and guiding. So
Yeah.
you're going and guiding trips, which takes you away from your kids and your family. They're not going on these trips guiding trips
Well,
with you.
uh, no, but okay. So like the longest trip we did was like 31 days.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a month. Then that was the only trip I did that year. Otherwise, I might do a couple of them And I learned very quickly when I guided that you really don't want to have any trips longer than about 10 days. And you're best if you can fit it in 7. And the
Hmm.
reason is then it's a week to week and people can get a week off. But with the Arctic trips, it really had to be longer than that. But I still would try to keep it to something like 10, 10 or 11 days
Hmm.
on the river and not let it go beyond that 14 mark, that two week mark, because then people can't get the time off.
Right.
So, if you get a couple, I don't know what your vacation schedule is, but if a lot of people only have 2 weeks vacation a year, well, you're pretty stuck.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing I can do for you except, you go out for a few days here and a few days there. Now, this said, I want to also share something, which is very important. It's not the time you spend outdoors, it's what you learn while you're there. Example, many years ago at Canoecopia, I'd given a talk, and that was about the Hood River, which was a 31-day trip.
Hmm.
And afterwards, a guy came up to me and he says, "What's the longest trip you've ever done, Cliff?" And I said, 31 days. And he says, "Well, I've been out for 42." So I know more than you, basically.
Hmm.
And you know what? It doesn't work that way. People learn. Some people learn fast. Some people never learn. I
Right.
can tell you stories about people who've done Arctic trips, long trips, like all summer long, and they've had one problem after another after another. They go home, they do a trip like that the following year, and they haven't learned anything. And there are other people who, my friend Dan Cook, who died not died recently, last summer, who had only been on a couple of northern trips. Almost all the rest of his canoeing was in Minnesota, the Boundary Waters, Whitewater Rivers, and so forth. Dan was a thinker. If you look at his equipment, you can see how thoughtfully designed it is because Dan learned. He's one of those guys that learned. So the first Arctic trip he did, he had no problem at all because he'd already figured it out. So, time spent, experience only counts if you take something from that experience and you think about it and you improve on it.
Hmm.
I think that's why my books have been successful, is because that's exactly what I've done. I've done a bunch of difficult trips, and if something fails, even once, it's done. I can give you a couple examples of that if you want to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's something that you've
All
kicked
right,
aside that failed
I'll give you an
one
example. I'll
one
give you an
time? Yeah.
example where people think I'm crazy. Then
Okay.
I'll give you another example where people think I'm less crazy. All right, the most crazy one was when we did a trip on the Groundhog River to the wasn't the Mississippi, it was the river right next to it, to James Bay.
Hmm.
Okay, and we were camped one day on it's sandbanks along that river, and we were cooking on a Coleman Peak One stove, which is a good stove, by the way. They don't really make the Peak One gasoline version anymore, I don't think, but it was a really good stove. I also had an Optimus 111B. Now, the difference between them was the B has a blowtorch burner, and the Coleman has a burner like you have in your kitchen gas stove.
Right.
The wind We got into a windstorm, a sandstorm. What happened was the sand clogged up all those little ports in that Coleman, and we could never restart it. We'd have to
Mm.
take the stove apart somehow and get that whole unit out and clean it out. We could. The 111B with the blowtorch burner was no problem at all. Since that time, now that's the only experience I've had with that, but since that time, I've avoided stove with silent multi-flame burners just because of that.
Mm.
Okay, some people think I'm crazy because of it, but that was enough for me one time. Because what happens is when you do some of these subarctic and Arctic rivers, you mess up, you die. You
Right.
don't. You may not get a second chance. Do it in the boundary waters unless you do something really stupid, or local rivers, you're going to be fine. But when the water temperature is 42 degrees and you capsize, unless you are right next to shore, you're going to die. So you can't, you have to do things that prevent that. The second example, and the one that I get the most grief about, is this business of putting a plastic ground cloth inside your tent, not under the floor.
Hmm.
People think by putting it under the floor, it saves the tent. It doesn't. I have tents that have been used in outfitting for decades. Those old Cannondales always had plastic ground cloths inside. They've been pitched on thorny ground. They've been pitched on sharp rocks. They've been pitched all over the world. When I sold them, after I used them intensively for 10 or 15 years, there wasn't a hole in a single floor. But there have been many times, many means three or more, okay, where I have been forced to pitch my tent at either in a swamp. Yes, once we had to do it literally in a swamp with one. You stood up, water would come over your chute this far. How did that happen? Went in by float plane. The plane set us down. The only place he could land was on the edge of a swamp. He said, I'll be back in 3 hours with the rest of the crew. He took half the crew in with the other half of the crew. Okay. He didn't come back because a storm came up. We had 4-foot waves on the lake and the wind blowing bloody murder. We had to set up the tents in the swamp. With that ground cloth inside the tent, you'd climb inside that tent and water was just, it was like sleeping on a waterbed. The entire tent, the floor was filled with water, but you were dry because the plastic was on the inside. Okay, so this happened to me in Texas on a canoe trip. It's happened to me surprisingly in the boundary waters on a canoe trip, because you can't always pitch your tent where they tell you to pitch it.
Right. Yeah.
When you go to Canada, many times going down a river, you'll paddle for hours just to try to find a flat spot that you can pitch a tent. And when you get to that flat spot, it may be very little, just enough to get the tent in. And there may be a big rock face over here that you're saying, oh God, please don't let it rain, because if it rains, the water's going to flow right down that rock face into your tent. If that happens, you're either going to be soaked or you're going to have a ground cloth in the side and you're going to be saved. So those are two things where I catch a lot of grief on. The third thing, of course, is the bears, but that's a subject for another time.
Well, I am kind of curious about that. But I got a question about the ground cloth on the inside. So you carry an extra plastic sheet, like some Visqueen or something.
Yes.
That, some construction grade plastic that is big enough to come up and wrap up the sides of your tent.
Yes, exactly.
You create like a bathtub.
Exactly. So you have a bathtub sort of going all the way around.
Right.
Now and the thing about the punctures is, if I take a piece of paper, okay, here's a piece of paper. Let's call it a ground cloth. Okay. All right. Here's another piece of paper. This is the floor of the tent. If I put the ground cloth in here and I start pushing up from here, the two pieces together offer more resistance than one. Would you agree?
Yeah.
All right. Now, I'm going to take the top one and I'm going to put it underneath and I'm going to push from here. It's the same deal. Only the other way works better. You want to know why? Because it's called a green stick break. If you pitch on thorns, what happens is the thorn has to come up, and what it's going to do, it's going to push real hard in here until it breaks the coating, the waterproof coatings on the inside of the tent. It's not on the outside. So it's going to push through until it breaks that coating. Once it breaks the coating, it pops through. So if you have the ground cloth on the inside, it's going to be harder to break the coating. I guess the point is that a lot of people question some of the things that I say, and they think I'm crazy, but I'm not. I'm not crazy. It's called wisdom. Right. And the reason why I do the things I do is because they work 100% time and time again. Now, here's another, I hate to go off on a rant, but there's a little story that I tell when people question some of my methods, and it goes like this. You're driving along in your car, and the friend sitting next to you is a a NASCAR race driver,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going around a curve a little fast, so you hit the brakes. Your friend turns to you and says, John, not a good idea. You don't hit your brakes in the middle of a curve. Okay. You hit your brakes going into the turn and you accelerate out of it. And you get a little indignant and you turn to him and you say, John, I've been driving for 40 years and I've never had a problem. He turns to you and he says, try it at twice the speed. What I'm trying to say is the kind of stuff that those of us who do these high-end Arctic trips, we're going twice the speed. Most people will never go that fast. They'll
Right.
camp in state parks in the boundary waters. They're not going to have problems because they are not going twice the speed. But if they do the same things they do in the boundary waters on a wild Canadian river, I'm going to tell you they're going to bring their canoe back in pieces in a suitcase if they survive at all.
Right. Good.
Sorry about the rant.
That's okay. It's all right. It's good. It's fun listening to these. What's the thing with the bears that you mentioned that people think you're crazy for?
Well, there's there's major chapters in my books, most notably,
Yeah,
most notably, that one.
I have that book.
Yeah. Okay. It's really very simple. Bears climb trees. Black bears climb trees. Period. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and the kids, the black bear kids, climb like little monkeys.
Right.
In fact, in the Smoky Mountains National Park, black bears overwinter in nests they build in trees. Okay?
Really?
Now,
Trees.
yes, really. Look it up. You'll see. When you go to the Smoky Mountains, there's big signs. Just they're very proud of the fact that these bears overwinter in trees. Armed with this, you need to understand that bears climb trees.
Yeah.
So when federal authorities tell you to put your food in a tree, it's simply a recipe for the bears going to climb up there and get your food. Now, if they have wires strung between metal poles, that's a different ballgame. They can't climb those.
They can't climb a post.
I have a picture of them climbing up a metal pole up into a high tension line. So maybe some of them can. But basically, it's not as easy as climbing a tree because they can't get a claw hold.
Right.
They can climb two ways. They can claw climb like a cat. They can hug climb like a human. So you mix the two together and they're very good at this. So then why do federal authorities tell you to tree your food? Because it's simple. They don't want you to get hurt. They don't give a whit if a bear gets your food, but they care if a bear gets you. So they go under the assumption that the best way to do that is keep them apart. Food there, people here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, you can't just say to somebody, put your food away from camp.
Right.
Okay. Because I had one guy raise his hand and said, Cliff, where does camp end? Okay. So you need a formula. So what you do is you say it has to be in a tree with a limb. I forget what it is. You can look it up. It's in the federal thing. But it's something like the tree has to be, the limb has to be something like 10 feet off the ground, 6 feet out or whatever. But in the northern boreal ecosystem, first of all, you're not going to find a lot of trees like that because they don't grow that big.
Yep.
But it doesn't matter because if a bear gets your food and you complain to a federal authority, they're going to say, well, where did you put your food? In that tree there. Where was the limb? Oh, well, that's not 10 feet off the ground. That's only 9 feet. We're off the hook. This is the reality of it.
Why would they be on the hook to begin with?
The Boundary Waters just passed this law last year that either you have to tree your food or you have to carry your food in bear-proof containers. The problem with that law is, first of all, the trees are very small in the Boundary Waters. The bears will climb up and get your food. Any experienced paddler who knows what they're doing is going to agree with me on this, okay?
I would agree, yeah.
All right. And as far as the containers for the food are concerned, This makes sense if you're going down the San Juan River or one of the western rivers. You're rafting down there. You got a big raft. You got can throw stuff in it, or it's a 2-day trip or a 3-day trip. People don't go on 2 or 3-day trips on the Boundary Waters. Most people go for a week. Some people go way longer than that. You can't fit enough food in those bear-proof containers to last more than a week unless you want to eat terribly and you have a lot of money because those
Right.
bear-proof containers are over $100 a piece.
Are
More
you
than
talking?
that.
Are you talking about the little ones, the little like canister ones, right? You're not
Yeah,
talking
I'm
about the
talking
big barrel.
about the plant. They come in plastic cans.
Yeah,
They have some. They have one that's Kevlar. They have there's another one that is a chainmail. Whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But you're not talking about the big blue food barrels,
That food barrels are not bear food. First
right?
of all, a barrel cut right through that. I have pictures of bears taking bites right out of them. So that's not bear proof. It's not accepted by federal authorities as
Hmm.
being that
Yeah, those
either.
canisters are. I tried using some a couple years ago on a trip in Alaska, and honestly, you know, the idea that I guess maybe they would have a hard time opening them up or getting into them. But this idea that, well, we got to put it at least
You
40
know what?
yards over there. Well, a bear can
You know
smell
what?
everything,
Okay, all right. So
you
here's the thing.
know.
All right,
I
so
mean,
if you want to talk about bears, we can talk about bears.
yeah,
So
why not? It's
all
a
right,
good
here's the
subject.
thing. If you go online, and in fact, if you read Canoeing Wild Rivers, it talks about the Bear Vault 500. Oh, I have one downstairs, which is
Hmm.
very, very popular plastic barrel, and it's got a tab. It's like opens like a medicine bottle. You can't use those in the Adirondacks because about a dozen years ago, there was a little female bear named Yellow Yellow. I think they named her Yellow Yellow because she had a yellow tag on her ear, who figured out how to open it. Then she told all of her friends. Pretty soon, every bear in the neighborhood could open it. So the factory produced a newer version of it with a double tab. And in order to do it, you had to actually hold it down with your nail, one of your nails, while you held the thing between your legs and turned the top. Yellow Yellow figured that out in about a day, and pretty soon every bear in the Adirondacks could open it. You can't use it there. Bears are smart. What I would do when I would do my bear talk, I would put one of my autograph books inside this thing and I would send it around to the audience. I would cover the instructions on how to open it. It was interesting. I said, give yourself a minute or two and then pass it on. It turns out that with adults, it would generally go through a dozen adults before they could figure out how to open it. Teenagers, it'd be the first or second one.
Wow,
Interesting.
that
So
is
the, the,
interesting.
the point is that the government views campers as incredibly unskilled, stupid about wildlife,
Yeah,
and they want to make it as safe and simple as they can. So they require this stuff.
yeah,
Unfortunately, those of us who know what we're doing get caught
yeah.
camping and gone to the Boundary Waters and so forth. In my 60 years of doing this, I have never had an animal get into anything that I have. Anything. And I don't put my food in a tree, and I don't use bear proof containers. Neither do really super experienced people.
So
I
what do
once
you
had a,
do without
uh,
tipping my hat? But what?
well, it's in the book. People
Yeah,
can people can read it because it's a long, it's a
yeah,
it's a process. And for me to just take a minute or two and tell people what to do without them understanding the basics, it's a, read about it first and then, we can go into it. Or some other time,
yeah.
if you want to do a whole thing on bears, I'll be prepared for it. And,
Sure, that's fair. That's
yeah.
fair. No, I agree with you. Hanging your food is a joke. Um, Storing it away from you, I guess. I mean, obviously, I don't like to sleep with it in my tent, but you know, I don't necessarily. I feel like if you have a fire, if you can have a fire, that often can do a fair amount just to keep a bear away.
Well, all right, I'll tell
But
you. I'll tell you a couple stories first of all. People think bears have this magic sense of smell. They smell, they have a good nose, yes. But you know what? When you are sitting on your, if okay, let's talk. If you want to talk about places like the Boundary Waters and Algonquin and whatever places where you got a lot of people and a lot of bears. When you're sitting on your campsite and a bear is 200 yards away, he's not smelling your freeze-dried chicken tetrazzini. He's smelling you. And he has learned that where there are people, there is food. It is as simple as that. He
yeah,
is going to come into your campsite no matter what you do with your food because you are there.
I
He has
agree.
also learned that food
Yep.
comes in certain kinds of containers. The first time he goes to a dump and bites through a tin can and finds food, anytime he sees a can, he's going to bite into it. And this includes film canisters, uh, he won't bite into a gas can. He can smell that. But if he doesn't have, if it has no odor, he'll bite into it. They are operantly conditioned to do that. The other thing is they are so freaking smart, you can't believe it. They can teach their children. They do teach their children. Black bears are one of the smartest animals in the woods. Grizzlies are a little dumber. I don't know how smart polar bears are, but I've had some problems with them and too, but it hasn't been about food. It's been about me.
Yeah.
So, um, I can only say we're not going to change how the government does this. They're going to keep doing this, and people are going to keep. And the thing is, you don't solve the problem by making a law. As all you because if you make a rule that okay, you have to have food in a bear-proof container. Well, first of all, there was basically I'm not sure there's any bear-proof container that if you get a smart enough bear, they can't figure it out.
Right.
And maybe if they can't figure it out, they can carry it away. So what people are actually going to do, they're going to get overconfident. They're going to say, hey, my food's in this bear-proof container. I'm just going to throw it up against this tree, which is 50 feet from my tent. Bear's still going to come in. He can smell you. He's going to look around. And even if there's no odor in there, even if your food is packed in odor-proof bags, they have those,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And you have used gloves to put it in there. Bears are smart. You know one thing about smart animals? They're curious. They're curious.
Yeah.
He'll see this container. I don't know what it is, but I shake it and there's something in there. I'm going to take it apart. Bears like to play just like people.
Right.
And they probably will take it apart. If they can't take it apart, maybe they'll carry it off. So, in other words, things are not, the federal authorities want a cut and dried rule that is going to keep people safe. They
Yeah.
don't care about anything else. And what I try to tell these people in my writing, and a lot of people think I'm crazy, they cuss at me, they write me bad letters about it. What I'm trying to tell you is if you learn your camping skills, you learn what works and what doesn't work. You're going to do what works.
Yeah.
And you go to northern Canada, the trees are too small to put anything in a tree. Okay. We also give people a lot of bad advice. One of the bad advices is, and people will do this all the time. I've never done it. When you camp on the tundra, put your food here, and then go put your food um, um, downwind of you, like 100 yards or whatever the case might be. Okay, or upwind of you, whatever.
Yeah.
The point is that what you're going to walk 100 yards now every time you want to, well, every time you want to make dinner, right? Oh, and guess what? This isn't a trip where the only way out's an airplane right away. I'm sorry. I want to see my food when I'm on a wilderness canoe trip. And if a bear comes into camp and tries to get my food, we're going to have a showdown. And if it's
Yes.
problematic, bang.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm going to do. Okay.
I
So
agree
now,
a hundred percent.
that, that this is unfortunately, this is not politically correct.
I
What I'm
know, I
saying.
know, I know.
Okay.
I am so. I'm glad I teased it
All right.
out of you. I teased it out of
Okay.
you because
Um,
I feel
but
the same way.
the other thing is you have to remember, as which I have remembered, is if you shoot a bear
Yeah,
in Canada, you're going to be there for a week filling out paperwork. And
right.
you better have a damn good reason to pull that trigger.
Yeah.
And
No,
it
I
better,
agree. I wouldn't take
okay?
shooting a bear lightly
All
at
right.
all.
So in all the years that I've done this, I've had a lot of face downs with bears. Okay? Where they have been standing as close as, I would say the closest one I had was 20 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
I have pictures of them. I didn't take the pictures. People behind me were taking pictures. And we talked. Anybody who thinks you can't talk to these animals doesn't understand these animals. Animals respond to body language.
Yeah.
And if your body language is appropriate and there's a strength in numbers because they're very smart. If you're alone, okay, you may have problems. Two of you, you may have problems. You get three or four. In fact, if you read Stephen Herrera, I think it's Stephen Herrera's book. I can't remember the name of these books. All in the back of Canoeing Wild Rivers. Um, he says there's been hardly any uh, instances where groups of four or more have been attacked by bear
Yeah.
because they're smart. They look, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe not.
Yeah. They do the math.
One or two, maybe, you
Yeah.
know. And if you're standing on a hill, they perceive you as being higher than they are. They perceive you as being taller,
Mm-hmm.
therefore more powerful. I guess is all I'm saying is instead of applying a simple solution to a complex problem, learn and understand the variables that contribute to that complex problem, and you won't have problems.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it this way. I've been outfitting and guiding canoe trips for 40 years. About, yeah, 40 years. I've seen scores, I don't know, probably hundreds of black bears, grizzlies, 20, 30 of them, something like that. Polar bears, at least 20. I've never had a problem with any of these animals. Okay. Why? Because if a bear can't smell your food or see your food, he won't get your food. And if you act appropriately, he'll leave you alone. He doesn't want to eat you, he wants your food.
Mm-hmm.
So people will say, well, Cliff, well, why do you carry a gun on a canoe trip if all, these are, we're talking Canada, Alaska now, if you've never had a bear problem? And I will respond by saying, I'm going to say again, it's about body language. If I go out there with a gun in my hand, I can talk to him like, hey, bud, we got a little problem here. You can't come any closer because if you go any closer, I'm going to have to shoot you. And that's not going to be a fun thing for you. So listen, we're going to be out of here in an hour or two. So, then you can enjoy this place. It's yours. And we can be friends again. Okay? Or if we can take the gun away. Okay? Now we can talk about pepper spray. That's another issue. We always carry pepper spray.
Yeah.
Now, if I go in there without a gun and I got this bear standing 20 feet away from me, it's going to sound like, hey, bear.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
So
changes your calculus.
that's right. And
Yep.
that's what this is all about. And so I catch a lot of grief on all this stuff because the people who are giving me grief, one, they've never seen a bear in the wild.
Yeah.
If they have, it's fleetingly running away at a distance with binoculars. Oh, wow, we saw a bear. Okay. But they've never had these experiences. So they just read this stuff they get from the government, and the government wants to scare them properly because they don't want them to get hurt. What can I say? As all I can say is if people read Canoeing Wild Rivers and they take that book to heart, they won't have problems because everything in that book works. There's nothing parroted from another author. There's nothing parroted from another book or anything else. There's 35, I think, different people involved in that book that are super experienced. Okay, so I mean, we can talk for hours,
We can.
but that's why I
That was
you know
great. No, that was cool. I'm glad I kind of teased it out of you. It sounds like we have a similar philosophy on that, which is interesting. So let's talk about axes for a minute and how in the rise of the popularity in saws. I noticed from your website that you may have an opinion, a strong opinion on this, and I would like to hear it as a fan of the axe myself. So
so so
I
you're
would love
talking.
to hear you
The
talk
question
about
is
that.
about axes.
Yeah, I mean, so
All right.
you see
Okay.
the rise of popularity in these saws,
All
right?
right.
Everyone's got a saw,
Okay.
everyone's got a saw,
All right.
but
Okay. I'll answer
axes
that.
are the first tool, right? I
All
mean,
right.
that's
First, okay. All
primacy.
right. So first of all, the Forest Service. Just a little backstory.
Hmm.
The Forest Service encourages people to quote, leave your axe at home. All you need is a Swiss Army knife and a little folding saw.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm pretty good at starting fires. In fact, I wrote the fire building unit for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Hunter Safety Program.
Hmm.
So I can start a fire under any and all conditions. Period. I can. I might have to rig a little cover, but in order to do that, I need three things. I need an axe, I need a saw, and I need a knife. I need those three things. And a Swiss Army knife is pretty minimal. I want a fixed blade knife for a reason, right? So let's just talk about axes first. When the Forest Service says that axes cause all this damage, let me tell you something. When they did this a few years ago, started dissing axes and said, "It's all you need is a saw." My wife and I did a canoe trip in the Boundary Waters. There was plenty of damage to trees in certain campsites. Guess what? It wasn't done with axes. It was done with saws. Okay, so people are very adept at saying, "Hey, okay, I left my axe at home, but I got the saw. Take the saw away, they'll do it with a knife. Take the knife away, they'll do it with a rock." Unless you teach them the ethics of why they shouldn't be doing it and how to do it a better way. So when people can't start a fire and it's a cold day, they get panicked. What am I? So then they start grabbing stuff and throwing it in there. They don't even know the basics of fire making. That's why you see these fire grates all choked up with green boughs and things like that, stuff that won't burn. Once on one of my canoe trips in Ontario, I'm sleeping. We're going to sort of sleep late, and I'm waking up. I get at 8 o'clock. I can sort of smell smoke. What's going on? I go back to sleep. 9 o'clock. I'm still smelling smoke. This is it. What's going on? I get up. They're can't start a fire. The wood's too wet. And I picked up the piece that they were using, and I went, "What do you smell it? You can smell it." Now, so then I felt around for another piece of wood. It was sort of wet. I cut about an inch off the end of it. Smell it. Oh, it smells okay. I said, "Okay, now we'll split it." Bang, bang, bang. And literally in about 3 or 4 minutes, we had a fire going. So people don't know the basic rules of fire making. So rule number one, I'm going to say this. Nobody goes on a serious canoe trip without an axe. Period. Now, it doesn't have to be a big, long, tall axe. It can be, and it shouldn't be actually, it can be a shorter axe or it can be a hand axe. We have used them many times where we've had to clear out portages. You need tools to clear a portage. And for that, you need a full frame saw and at least a hatchet with decent weight to it.
Yep.
And and if you're going really in the wilds, you probably want a couple saws anyway, and a couple of hatchets. But going on a canoe trip without an axe is asking for trouble. Besides, you need to be able to put your tent. Sometimes you got to pound tent pegs into the ground. You
Yeah.
can buy these little plastic hatchets at Walmart for $8 or $6 or whatever, and use that. I have some friends who do. But why? Why not just take the hatchet, then you got a pounding tool, and you can split wood. Because
Yeah.
when wood is wet, the only way you're going to get to the dry heartwood is to split it. And you
Right.
won't do that with a Swiss Army knife.
No, no.
So
I
that's
grew up with axes. I mean, I've got a ton of them that been passed down through the generations of my family, and I love an axe.
well, the
I
truth
feel
is,
like I don't need a saw is what I don't need.
no, actually, I would say to
But
you that for on most canoe trips, for most purposes, the saw is going to get more of a workout than the axe. If there's something across a portage that you want to remove, the saw is a more efficient tool.
hmm,
But you really need them both, because there are times when you got to get in there and do limbing, and you can't do it with a saw, but you can pop them off. You can pop them off with an axe. But more importantly, the important thing with the axe is as a splitting tool. One of the things I do not allow on my canoe trips, I don't allow people to chop like this. I don't allow them to chop.
you don't
And the
allow them to
reason
chop
why,
wood.
I've seen, yes, because I've seen two accidents, one of which went right into a guy's knee. It's not worth it on a canoe trip. I require, for splitting wood, it has to be done my way. And my way is the piece is set up like so. You hold that hatchet on there with both ends. Somebody comes along with a chunk of wood, pounds it through.
Oh,
That's
like with a
how we
wedge.
split. That
Right.
has to be done that way because it's the safe way.
Hmm.
You you know the thing is, it's like with this first aid stuff. They say you're going on these canoe trips and you want to get this first aid training.
Hmm.
And so they're all training you about how, oh, you got a major axe in your knee, or you got a broken leg, or you tore a big cut in your thigh. You know what? In all my years of running these canoe trips, I've never had problems like that. Why? Because if you put rules in place and you know what you're doing, you don't have those problems. What I have had is scratched corneas, ear infections, simple things,
Hmm.
sprains, cuts, burns, infected. That's what I've had. And that's what people should focus on when they go on these trips, because those are the problems you're going to have. When we did these trips, guys like me, I'm 84 years old, okay? When we did these trips, we did not have satellite phones or GPS units.
Right.
The only way in and out was an airplane, and he wasn't coming until day 16 or whatever. If you had a problem, you better fix it. So guess what? You better not have a problem. Today, I got a satellite phone. I've got an inReach. All I have to do is call. Well, lucky you. And you know what? That's changed the whole nature of canoeing and camping. Now the attitude is things are tough. Call on the satellite phone. Get us out of here. Cool. Text on the inReach. We got to get out of here. It's you know. So people are now discouraged from learning skills. I don't have to know that, man. If it gets tough, I'll just call my way out of here. No, it's only another $3,000, whatever. I'm sorry, I get into a rant on these things because the truth is, the reason why people have problems in the outdoors is because they don't know anything. They don't know, and for the most part, they don't want to learn. They think they can buy something to solve their problem.
Hmm.
They're getting a hole in their tent's blown down, they need a better tent. They're hitting rocks, oh, they need a more durable canoe. I would say that 90% of the questions I get about what canoe should I buy pertains to how strong it is, how durable it is. Like, hello, wrap a canoe around a boulder, any canoe, no matter what it's made of, and hey, buddy, guess what? It's gone, gone. So you know what? You better not hit that rock. You know how to prevent that? Learn how to paddle. That
Right.
means you might have to go to school for it.
Well, I was going to ask you if you thought that there was more of a uh, people there was a lack of skill and more dependence on technology and gear, but you already answered that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's my motto, in fact.
yeah,
Skills are more important than things.
yeah, but I'd like to. I want to bring up a couple pictures which I think are of you. So this is the pack boat that I got. in part because of your recommendation of them. And it has been a really fun boat. I've gotten it out several times, did a couple overnights in it, and I'm
You
pretty
need,
impressed. I guess I should explain what a pack boat is. It's a canoe or a kayak that is a skin on frame boat. The skin is like a rubberized PVC or urethane, and the frame are aluminum poles that snap together. They're pretty durable. They can pack up and go with you traveling on a plane, in your car. No need for a rack. You can stow them in your closet. And they're pretty darn tough. They handle whitewater pretty well since they give and flex, and they can kind of ride up over the waves. Here is the website, pakboat.com, and you can check out some of their boats there. They're like any boat, they're not cheap, but all good boats, you get what you pay for. So, anyways, give it a look. Pretty sweet boats. You actually um, messaged me on Facebook, or you answered a question I had about a pack boat, buying a pack boat last year,
oh, okay.
and so I ended up getting a pack boat because of
What'd you
your
get? Did
recommendation.
you get a 17 or what'd you get?
No, I got a 15
Okay.
T, a T15.
Well, the 15 you can, when I was in Norway, we were paddling those rivers in Norway.
Uh huh.
Uh, we all paddled solo. Everybody was paddling a 15 except me. I had a 14. He doesn't make the 14 anymore. But it was no, I mean, there was really no difference in flat water or in rapids between the 14 and the 15. The 14 was a little more maneuverable.
Yeah.
And I'm not a very big guy, so it worked fine for me. But they're great boats. I mean, they are just, I mean,
Yeah.
when Alf Elvsted, who owns Pack Boats, said invited me on this trip to Norway, he said, "Well, yeah," he said, "we're all going to paddle solo," and I said, "Well, that's fine." Then I said to myself, "Well, there's not going to be any rapids. I mean, these boats aren't really strong enough for big class 3 stuff, right?" And I'm sure there's not. I'm sure portages there's going to be yokes. It's to be proper.
Mhm.
Well, I got the wrong. Some of the biggest rapids I've ever done in a solo canoe, I did on that trip. And as far as yokes are concerned, Alf is a Norwegian. Don't need no yoke, and those boats are still, even the little 14 footer is 50 pounds.
Yeah.
And so we wound up pretty much dragging these boats like a dog on a leash over much of a there was still snow on some of the portage or some of the places to portage, and we didn't put a single hole in any boat the entire trip. It was amazing, and we hit a lot of stuff. They are tough, boy,
Yeah.
and boy do they go through rapids. I mean, given a choice between a hard boat and a pack boat of the same size without a spray cover, I'll take the pack boat every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, well, it was that endorsement that you basically gave me back then that led me to go ahead and pull the trigger on a used one. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. It's a really great tool to have in the quiver.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, I think you'll like it.
yeah. All right.
Okay. That's
That's
me.
you.
That's a 14 footer.
Okay.
How'd
And
you,
I
uh,
got these off of the Packboat website. Where was this? I mean,
this was it was either the Latacino River in Norway or the Porino River in Finland. I can't remember which one.
yeah. I mean, I can think of a few reasons why I think these are probably a superior tool in many ways to having a hard boat. But I
Well,
was
if
curious
you're
what you
going to
thought about
Canada, I mean, if you're going to Canada or Alaska, you're going to get your. First off, you're going to Alaska. They won't fly. They won't fly canoes on the pontoons. So
it. Yeah.
you need, yeah. Okay.
All right. Pack boats. This is not a commercial for pack boats unless they want it to be.
They're
Um,
great boats. So they're
they
great
are.
boats.
They're good. They seem really durable. And I mean, my experience with the inflatables is that they're super strong,
Yeah.
I'm not too afraid of, you know, beaching them or, as long as you're not stupid about it,
It's like
obviously.
a rubber tire. They
Yeah.
just yeah, it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, I have a lot of faith in that material, and if it does get a hole in it, it's not that hard to patch. It's, I
Yeah.
think, probably a lot easier than trying to patch a hole in a hard boat.
I patched them, you use the patching kit that they give you, and the patch takes 15 minutes and you're done.
Yeah.
So,
Um, Cliff, what are a couple rivers, in your opinion, that you think in Minnesota or elsewhere that are not getting enough attention or love? Like, where would you direct people to go check out before they get assaulted, so to speak?
well, there's a lot of wonderful rivers. I just came off one 2 days
Yes.
ago.
Oh,
I
yeah,
would,
that's right.
yeah. Um, it's one of the most, I think it's one of the most beautiful rivers in the country. It's also a very heavily canoed river. But if you go early enough, which we did, well, we just got back 2 days ago. Um, the Jack's Fork in Missouri is just a wonderful river.
Uh-huh.
You need people who don't know what they're doing go down it all the time, but they do wreck some canoes in the process. There are, depending on water levels, if the water's high, you'll have some fun rapids in there. You'll have some class twos. Um, you if you want to play it safe and everything, you need I would say you need to be an advanced beginner whitewater.
Hmm.
You can be a total beginner because a lot of people that go down that river are and they get down okay, but you're going to have a lot of adventures in the process.
Okay.
So if you're an advanced beginner, you can do the jack sport. Um, while you're there, you might as well do the current too. The water is so crystal clear, you can see down 20 feet and there's no turbidity at all. It's
Wow.
blue like you're in Hawaii. It's
All
gorgeous.
right.
And
Well,
great camping, great camping. You can build a fire anywhere you want. You can camp anywhere you want. Now, the Buffalo River in Arkansas is like that too. That's another one that a million people go down, but they also wreck some canoes in the process. So I would say be an advanced beginner. Well, you need to have some basic rapids experience other than just ruddering.
hmm.
You may get down by doing that, but you also may get into trouble.
Hmm.
So those I think are the Ozark rivers are just absolutely delightful. Um, the Arkansas and Missouri rivers are about as good as it gets if you want to have a great canoeing experience, but you also want to have the freedom to build an open fire wherever you want
Hmm.
and to camp wherever you want. Now, not a lot of rivers offer that. All right. Now, in the boundary waters, you have some restrictions. The Boundary Waters is beautiful. I love it. I highly recommend it. And if you're a canoeist, you're certainly going to go there sometime. But the campsites are designated. You don't need reservations. You just find a campsite and you go. There's a lot of campsites.
Hmm.
Fires are restricted to fire grates. Okay. And of course, they got this bear proofing thing with your food in a tree
Right.
or whatever. Ultimately, if you you become an accomplished paddler and a serious camper, you're going to want to go to Canada. Though with the current climate politically going on now, right now Canada is not very happy with us, and I don't blame them a bit.
Yeah.
I'm on their side.
Yeah, me
So,
too. I
um,
am. I 100%.
um, and the Canadians aren't going to come here either right now.
No.
So I don't know what to say. You still got Alaska.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well,
one
that's
of the,
good.
yeah, the Florida Everglades, that was an interesting trip too, going across the Everglades. It's not something I do again, but it was a week, 8 day, 9 day, 10 day trip, something like that.
Cool.
But it was interesting.
All right.
So,
Well, great.
uh, yeah.
Well, Cliff, where can people connect with you if they want to find your
Well, they
work?
can get me as first of all, if they forget, they can just type in Cliff Jacobson and
Yep.
my website will come up. Otherwise, it's Cliff Canoe, all one word, cliffcanoe.com.
Great. I'll link
And
to that in the notes.
I do a blog on there. I haven't had one up for a couple months now because this is summer, man. No, I don't want to write during the summer.
Yeah.
There's over 100 blogs on there now, and they're all free. You can just do it. There's a shop where you can buy autographed copies of my books. There's also Audibles. Now, a lot of my books are in Audibles
Hmm.
now, too.
No, it's a
So,
wealth of information, your website. So I will link to
and they
that.
can contact me. There's a contact thing, and I usually get back to people in a day or two. So
Great.
I'm happy to chat with them.
All right.
So,
Well, Cliff,
very
it's been a
happy.
real pleasure. I sure do appreciate you sitting down with me and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and learning a little bit about you. It's been a lot of fun. So thanks again.
You're welcome, Ryan. You take care, and thanks for having me on.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
All right, so Cliff Jacobson, everybody. Check out some of his books. I'll link to his website below, or here, or here, or here. I don't know. And this was a video cast as well, so you can always watch it on YouTube, Ivan Outdoors. Or if you found it on YouTube, you can find it anywhere you find your podcast, whether it be over the counter or on the black market. So, until next time, thanks.